Hi, I'm Aileen. My family made up a lie to keep me from attending Thanksgiving, but I was the only one left out. They said nothing, sent nothing, just held the dinner, smiled for photos, raised glasses in a home that, on paper, belonged to me. But worse than the lie was the quiet theft, the ring that vanished, the brand that was mine, and the house I was written out of. Why did they fight so hard to pretend I didn't exist, until Grandpa showed up at my door with an envelope that changed everything? Would you still call them family after what they did to me? Or would you do what I did? The light coming through my blinds that morning was soft and filtered, typical for November in Seattle. I was sitting by the window with my coffee, watching the rain slip down the glass like it had all the time in the world. I had just finished rearranging a client's living room the night before, and my body ached in the familiar way that comes from moving furniture on your own, without help or fanfare. That morning, I opened my laptop and typed out a short email to the family thread. Hey, any plans for Thanksgiving this year? I'd love to host or help out if someone else already is. I read it twice before hitting send, then stared at the blinking cursor afterward, as if waiting for someone to acknowledge me the moment it arrived. Nothing. Not that day, not the next. At first, I chalked it up to busyness. People get distracted, emails get buried. But I'd seen Colby post a new listing to his real estate page. Aileen had uploaded a boomerang of her oat milk latte to Instagram. A mom had shared a picture of a sunset with a caption that read, "Grateful for the little things." Apparently, I wasn't one of those things. I checked my spam folder. I refreshed the inbox. I even texted Aileen a quick, "Did you get my email?" She left me on read. That kind of silence doesn't echo, it hums. Low, constant, like it's always been there, but you've just gotten quiet enough to hear it. 3 days later, while scrolling through Ailin's Instagram again, yes, I know I shouldn't have, I saw it. A screenshot of a group chat named Thanksgiving Prep. It wasn't our usual family group thread. This was something else. A new chat. One I hadn't been invited to. And from the visible messages, they'd already divvied up who was bringing what to Mom's house. Ailin's caption, "We do it right every year." Every year. Something about those two words made me feel like a ghost. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they thought I wouldn't want to come. Maybe. But no. I wasn't doing that to myself this time. I'd done it before, rationalized their silence, wrapped it in tissue paper so I wouldn't have to admit it felt like rejection. I decided to write another message, this time longer, heartfelt. I just wanted to say I'd really love to be part of whatever you're planning. I know we haven't always been close, but I miss all of you, especially around the holidays. I paused before hitting send, unsure if I was opening a door or handing them another way to ignore me. It went out at 8:16 p.m. on a Wednesday. By Saturday, still no reply. But Mom had responded to a forwarded chain about Vera's pumpkin cheesecake being a holiday must-have. She even added a recipe link. I read my own message again. Did I sound needy? Too emotional? Did I make it awkward by wanting something so simple? It's strange how hope, when ignored long enough, starts to feel like humiliation. As the week of Thanksgiving arrived, my calendar still had family dinner marked on Thursday. I didn't delete it. I couldn't. Some part of me still hoped someone would remember I existed. The night before Thanksgiving, I walked to the market and picked up a small turkey breast, instant mashed potatoes, and a can of cranberry jelly. It felt ridiculous, but I needed to do something, anything. I wasn't going to sit in silence like they wanted me to. I'd make my own dinner, for one. That Thursday morning, I cleaned the apartment while the turkey baked. I set the table, lit a candle, and poured a glass of wine, even though I wasn't in the mood. I tried to make it feel like it mattered. The truth? It didn't. By evening, I sat alone with the food untouched. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional honk of traffic below my window. I thought maybe I'd put on a movie or call an old friend, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the place setting across from me. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Aileen is going live. I didn't click it at first. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding in my throat. Part of me wanted to turn the phone off entirely, but the other part, the one that still needed proof of what I already knew, clicked. The screen lit up, and what I saw made my stomach twist. The image on my phone flickered for a moment before settling into focus. Ailin's face filled the screen, flawless, glowing with highlighter, framed perfectly by the soft gold lighting in Mom's kitchen. I recognized the tiled backsplash and that hideous decorative rooster she refused to get rid of. Behind her, laughter erupted, glasses clinked. The kind of easy joy that used to make me feel safe before I realized it was never meant for me. Aileen flipped the camera to show the whole room. Mom stood by the stove, plating stuffing like she was hosting a segment on daytime TV. Colby leaned against the counter, wine in hand, making some loud joke about turkey emergencies that drew another round of laughter. I knew that laugh, unforced, familiar. It echoed down the hallway of my memory like a cruel reminder. The stream had already been going for 10 minutes by the time I tuned in. From the timestamp, I could tell they'd started hours ago. The table was set. Everyone had arrived. Everyone but me. No empty seat left. No place card bearing my name. I wasn't late. I was never invited. I don't know why I kept watching. Maybe I needed proof, something tangible to justify the weight I'd been carrying for so long. Maybe part of me still hoped someone, anyone, would notice I wasn't there and ask where I was. But the only question Aileen answered in the chat was about the brand of wine she was serving. My thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to exit. But then the camera panned to the living room. There they were, all posing for a group photo in front of the fireplace. I recognized the cardigan Mom was wearing. I'd helped her pick it out last fall. She told me it was too chic for a holiday, but apparently not too chic for this one. Later that night, after the live stream ended, I made the mistake of checking Instagram again. My feed refreshed, and there it was, posted by a family friend. A group photo in the exact same spot I'd just seen, except this version had been edited, cropped. I wasn't in it. I remember that day now, clearer than ever. It was a small get-together, or so I thought. Aileen had invited me last minute, made it sound like a casual coffee drop-by. I wore that same cream sweater and the gold locket Grandpa had given me for graduation. When I arrived, they were already gathering by the fireplace. I offered to take the photo so everyone could be in it. No one offered to switch places so I could join. Now I understood why. It hadn't just been this Thanksgiving. It had been a series of erasures, small, precise, calculated. The stream had ended, but I couldn't bring myself to shut off my phone. I stared at my reflection in the black screen. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too stunned to summon the tears. I was processing not just the exclusion, but the deliberate way it had been orchestrated. And as I sat there wrapped in silence, my phone buzzed again. This time, a new post from Aileen, a photo of Mom raising a glass, her smile wide and content. The caption read, "To family, those who are always there." That broke me. I felt the words slam into my chest like a punch I hadn't braced for. I whispered to no one, "If I'm not family tonight, then I never was." I stood up, the candle on my table still flickering. The turkey I'd made had gone cold, the mashed potatoes untouched. I opened a bottle of wine, not out of celebration, but as a quiet protest. I poured a single glass and sat down, facing the chair across from me. It was still empty, still waiting, but I wasn't going to let their silence define me anymore. I grabbed a notepad from my drawer, the kind I used to sketch out room layouts and color palettes. Instead, I began outlining the timeline, the emails I'd sent, the responses they ignored, the calls they didn't return. I wasn't sure what I was building yet. But I knew it was something. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing clarity. The toast was meant to erase me, but I was about to make sure they'd never forget I exist again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I must have drifted in and out, but my mind kept circling back to that moment. The toast, the laughter, the deliberate absence of my name, my face, my existence. I sat on the edge of my bed with a blanket wrapped around me, watching the sky shift from navy to gray, the kind of color that makes everything feel muted, and I realized I'd felt muted for a long time. I opened my journal, the one I only ever used when words refused to stay inside. I didn't know what I was going to write, but I started anyway. Thanksgiving wasn't the first time, I wrote, just the loudest. A memory surfaced before I even finished the sentence. Last year, I made the mistake of thinking I could fix things. I baked Mom's favorite apple pie, my crust from scratch, the filling a little extra cinnamon, just how she liked it when I was a teenager. I drove 3 hours to drop it off, unannounced, sure, but only because I thought it would be a nice surprise. I remember standing on the porch, hearing music and voices inside. I rang the bell, waited, rang again. Through the frosted glass, I could make out movement, shadows crossing the hallway. No one answered. I left the pie on the mat, tucked a note inside the box. Hope you're all having a good holiday. Love, A. No one ever mentioned it. No call, no text. A week later, I saw a picture of a different pie on Elowen's story. Store-bought. Caption: nothing like Mom's house for the holidays. I had told myself back then maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't hear the bell, but now I knew better. They heard me. They saw me. They chose not to open the door. And that wasn't an isolated moment. I started making a list in my journal. Birthday brunches moved up a day. A cousin's wedding I only found out about from Facebook photos. Family group messages where I'd chime in and get ignored, then watch as others chatted right around me. I remember asking Colby once, years ago, after a 4th of July I wasn't invited to, "Is there something I did?" He had shrugged and said, "Don't take everything so personally, Aileen. People have their lives." As if mine didn't count. Back then I had let it go, told myself to stop being dramatic. But this time, after what I'd seen, I couldn't unsee it. Another memory crashed forward, sharper, colder. 2 years ago, there was a family reunion being planned. I had called Mom to ask if I could help organize it. I even suggested a venue I knew, one I'd worked on redesigning, thinking it could be a lovely place to gather. She cut me off mid-sentence. "This is more of a family decision," she said. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my phone in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other, not entirely sure I'd heard her right. "I am family," I'd said quietly. She didn't respond. She changed the subject. I didn't bring it up again. But it settled into me like cement, heavy, final. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being edited out. That phrase, more of a family decision, had lived in my head like a tattoo under the skin, subtle but permanent. Now, in the stillness of my apartment, I flipped open the file cabinet beside my desk. Dust clung to the manila folders. I hadn't touched some of these in years. Old emails with Grandpa's attorney, copies of property records, a few letters from Grandpa in his handwriting, careful, slanted, with that little curve at the ends of his Y's. I reread one of them. Aileen, when all is said and done, I trust you'll know what's right. You've always had a better sense of fairness than most. At the time, I thought he was talking about a disagreement I'd had with Elwyn over a family loan. Now, I wasn't so sure. I started sorting, highlighting, marking dates. No more questions. No more wondering if I was overreacting. I had facts now. Patterns. Proof. Maybe I wasn't ready to confront them yet, but I was ready to stop hiding from the truth. If I was ever going to matter, it wouldn't be by asking for a seat. I'd have to take the table. The next morning arrived with a strange sense of purpose. I didn't reach for my phone like I usually did. Instead, I walked straight to my desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and slid out the old shoebox I hadn't touched in years. Dust clung to the edges like time had been trying to bury it. Inside, folded paper, envelopes, printed emails, RSVP cards, remnants I'd kept without knowing why. Until now. I spread them out across the dining table, sorting by date, subject line, handwriting. One by one, they whispered truths I hadn't wanted to hear before. Holiday invites I never received. Photos mailed out without me in them. Emails that hinted at parties I somehow missed. Then I saw it. One of Elwyn's forwarded emails from a few months back, when she accidentally looped me in. It was a digital invite for Thanksgiving, addressed to the Thompsons. Mom, Colby, Elwyn, Elwyn's boyfriend, even some distant relatives from Ohio. But not me. Not even as a +1. Forgetting can be an accident, I muttered to myself. This was precision. I sat with that thought for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen until the edges of the text blurred into something like resignation. But then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Hi, it's me. Silence stretched too long on her end. I heard a clink, maybe a spoon tapping the edge of a mug. I saw the Thanksgiving invite, I said. The one Elwyn forwarded by mistake. Her sigh was loud and deliberate. Aileen, don't start. I just want to understand why. There was a pause, then she said it, casually, like reciting a grocery list. You know why we didn't include you. You ruin everything. I froze. It wasn't the words, it was the ease with which she said them. You always find a way to make things complicated, she added. And frankly, we needed peace this year. Peace? She said it like I was the one who'd brought chaos. Not the years of silence, not the subtle cuts, not the empty chairs or cropped-out photos. I see, I said, keeping my voice even. I have to go, she added. We're having lunch with the Harrisons. She hung up before I could say anything else. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then I placed it face down on the table. So that was it. Not a misunderstanding, not an oversight, not even a half-hearted apology. Just clarity. You ruin everything, Aileen. The words echoed in my head, but they didn't sting the way they might have once. This time, they settled into something solid. Not pain, direction. I pulled out Grandpa's old file box. I remembered he'd given it to me years ago when I helped him with his taxes one summer. You're the only one who ever keeps track of things, he'd said. Inside, labeled tabs, property, utilities, deeds. I found the one marked House Transfer Records. The name listed, Harold P. Wesson, but a sticky note attached said, Aileen, this will be yours one day. Keep it safe. I exhaled slowly, then turned to my laptop. I started searching county records. I emailed a real estate lawyer. I attached a scan of the note, the file, and Grandpa's signature. And then I wrote calmly, I'm requesting a verification of title transfer records on behalf of Harold P. Wesson, deceased. I believe I have a legal interest in the property. It wasn't about begging them to accept me anymore. It wasn't about making them see me. It was about making sure they couldn't ignore me. The words from Mom still echoed, "You ruin everything." But now I heard them differently. Maybe I did ruin things. The lies, the illusions, the rewriting of who belonged and who didn't. Maybe it was time I did. The first real battle wouldn't be loud. It would be legal. It was nearly noon when I finally opened my laptop again. The legal forms I'd filed the night before were still open on the screen, but I wasn't ready to look at them yet. Instead, I clicked over to my reservation app, the one I'd used to book a table for Thanksgiving weeks ago. It was supposed to be a quiet dinner for me and a couple of friends who didn't have plans either. I'd reserved early, picked the menu, even prepaid for the wine. Canceled, the screen read. Refund processed. I hadn't canceled it. My pulse spiked. I tapped the call button and waited. Harvest table. This is Alicia speaking. Hi, I had a reservation for last week under Aileen Wesson, but I just got a cancellation notice. I didn't request one. Let me check. Her voice was pleasant, distracted. Looks like it was canceled by phone. We confirmed with Elowen? The breath I drew in felt thick. I knew better than to act surprised, but it still hit like betrayal with a fresh coat of varnish. Did she say why? A pause. Just that the plans had changed. Right, I said quietly. They usually do. After we hung up, I stared at the blank corner of my kitchen wall for several minutes. It wasn't about the meal. It wasn't even about the people. It was about the effort. I had made space for reconciliation. She had burned the invitation. That word circled in my brain. Invitation. It reminded me of another one. 2 years ago, I mailed out printed invites to a small gallery opening I was part of. It wasn't a big deal, just a shared space downtown with other artists, but it was the first time I'd had my own series displayed. I sent one to Mom with a handwritten note. I'd love for you to see what I've been working on. The night of the event, I saw her, Vera, in a photo someone else posted, at a dinner party, smiling wide. A week later, I visited for a family brunch. She pulled me aside in front of a few aunts and cousins and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Don't send me this nonsense again. You want attention, not connection." Then she laughed. So did everyone else, nervously. I laughed too, because sometimes survival sounds like laughter. Back in the present, I stood up from the kitchen table and opened the filing cabinet by the fridge. I pulled out a thin folder labeled Property. My hands didn't shake. They felt like they'd finally remembered their job. I read through every document Grandpa had given me. Then I logged into the county website and searched public title records. I needed to see, with my own eyes, if the transfer had ever actually gone through. I didn't want to believe that my family would lie about something like this. But belief wasn't serving me anymore. Facts would. A few hours later, I picked up the phone and called the number my coworker had given me. A real estate attorney with the kind of low-profile website that screams competence, not flash. Cameron Law Office, a voice answered. This is Rachel. Hi, I'm looking to speak to someone about property ownership disputes within a family. A house was promised to me by my grandfather, and I have some documentation, but I need to verify if it was ever legally transferred. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. You've called the right place. I sent over the scans within the hour. I didn't dramatize anything. I didn't write a sob story in the email. Just attached are records, notes, and related correspondences. Please advise. Because this wasn't about drama anymore, it was about facts. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I wasn't hungry, But I did pull out my journal again and wrote a single line. They keep throwing knives I refuse to catch. I didn't confront Elowen. I didn't reply to Mom's last text about someone's birthday. I didn't post any vague quotes or cryptic stories. I moved forward, quietly, with intention, because every slight, every erasure, every missed message, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a strategy, a long game I hadn't agreed to play, but now I understood the rules. I wasn't going to respond with venom. I wasn't going to beg for my seat back at their table. I was going to build one of my own. I didn't raise my voice, but I was already drafting my opening argument. The knock came just after 8. I wasn't expecting anyone. I had just finished sending the scanned property documents to Rachel, the real estate lawyer, and was about to pour myself a second glass of wine when I heard it. Not the rushed tapping of a delivery guy, not the rhythmic knock of a neighbor needing help. No, this was slower, purposeful. I opened the door, and there he was, Grandpa Harold, standing in the dim glow of the porch light with his old wool coat zipped to his chin and a manila envelope tucked tightly under one arm. "You got a minute?" he asked. That was Harold's way. Direct, no small talk, no fuss. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. "You're lucky I didn't deadbolt it already. Wouldn't have blamed you if you had." He walked in without another word, taking in the quiet of my apartment like it was a church. I closed the door, heart racing but trying to appear as neutral as the lighting in the room. He didn't sit. He placed the envelope gently on the kitchen counter like it was something fragile, sacred almost. "We need to talk," he said, turning toward me. "You've been kept in the dark too long." I nodded slowly, but said nothing. My stomach was tight. I wasn't sure if I wanted what he had to give or if I'd already guessed and didn't want to hear it confirmed. He slid the envelope toward me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a copy of a property deed, dated 3 years ago. The address was Mom's house. But under ownership, there it was, my name, not as a witness, not as a backup, as a co-owner. I looked up at him, speechless. "Your name's been there all along," Harold said. "I had the paperwork drawn up when you were helping me with recovery. You remember that year?" Of course I remembered. I'd spent weeks at his side after his hip replacement, canceling jobs, driving him to appointments, arguing with the insurance company when they tried to shortchange him. Elowen had called once. Colby hadn't shown up at all. "I thought it was only fair," he continued. "You were the only one who gave a damn. I told your mother to deliver the documents properly. I assumed she would." He shook his head. "I see now that was a mistake." The paper trembled slightly in my hand, not from weakness, but from everything it confirmed. I hadn't just been left out of dinner. They had rewritten me out of the will, out of the house, out of the family narrative, on purpose. I sat down, needing the weight of the chair to hold me steady. "So they knew?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Harold sat across from me. "I can't say what Colby or Elowen knew, but your mother? She knew. From the beginning." I pressed the corner of the paper against the table, hard enough to crease it. That's why she reacted the way she did when I brought up the title search. She knew she'd been sitting on this, hoping I'd never dig. He gave a solemn nod. "I never meant to throw you into a fight, but if you're going to have one, it should be with the truth in your corner." I didn't speak for a few minutes. I let the weight of it all settle. This wasn't just personal. It was legal. It was financial. It was structural. And it had been buried like a body no one wanted found. I folded the document and slid it back into the envelope. "I'm done playing by their rules." Harold looked at me, something like pride flickering behind his tired eyes. "You don't have to fight like they do. You already have the truth. Just don't let them talk you out of it." I stared at the envelope for another beat, then stood and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop, pulled up Rachel's email, and attached the new documents. No one's talking me out of anything anymore. With one click, I sent it. They thought I didn't belong. But this paper said otherwise. And now the silence was over. Right after I hit send on the final email to Rachel, something else caught my eye. A ping, a notification from Instagram. I wasn't expecting it, wasn't looking for it. But I opened it anyway. Out of reflex, maybe. Aileen had posted something new, and not just a photo of her overpriced brunch or curated selfies in soft light. It was a sponsored post. Her face filled the screen, glowing, polished, the same way the furniture in Mom's living room looked the day of the live stream. She stood confidently in front of a wall I recognized from my first mock-up. Behind her, a sleek logo I had drawn by hand 3 years ago. The brand name, mine, the one I'd registered with the state, had designed business cards for, built a website around, dreamed about. She captioned it, "Carrying on the family's creative legacy." I froze, read it again. No mention of me, of my work, of the hours I'd poured into what she had now stolen wholesale. I pulled up my files, hands trembling. LLC formation papers, trademark filing, logo drafts, emails from web developers, everything with timestamps, dates, proof. And there she was, posing in my dream like she had crafted it herself. "I built this," I whispered. "I filed for it. And now she wears it like a crown." It wasn't just theft. It was an erasure. Again. But this time it had a price tag. A PR campaign. A platform. I scrolled back to Grandpa's note, the deed, the sticky note that read, "This will be yours one day." And suddenly, I remembered something else. During one of our late-night conversations, Grandpa had mentioned a visit to a notary. "Your mother was supposed to follow through," he had said. "Let me know if she ever did." I had never followed up. Now I opened my inbox and searched. One email jumped out, sent months ago from Grandpa's old assistant. Unread. I clicked. "Harold asked me to forward this to you in case anything ever came up." Attached was a video file, low resolution, grainy. I clicked play. The footage was from a security camera in a small office, probably the notary's. Grandpa sat across from a woman with a laptop, speaking slowly but clearly. "This house goes to Aileen," he said. "She deserves it. She's the one who's been here." The woman nodded and typed something. "And you want her name on the deed?" "Yes, effective immediately." The timestamp matched the date on the deed in my envelope. I sat back in my chair. Vindication doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like a silence that finally makes sense. I forwarded the video to Rachel, along with the LLC documents and screenshots of Ailin's post. Then I opened my business profile. I didn't post a long essay. No paragraphs. Just one sentence over a black background, white letters. "If someone steals your voice, you don't whisper, you write louder." It started slowly. A comment here, a message there. "Wait, didn't Aileen create that brand? This logo looks just like her design. Pretty sure she pitched this 2 years ago. Then it picked up speed. Someone tagged me directly. Isn't this your company?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. By morning, Aileen had deleted the post, but the damage was done. I poured my coffee, watching the sunlight slide across the kitchen counter. I felt no need to gloat. There was no trophy in this, only truth, and the fact that it was finally speaking louder than any curated caption. The next time we'd be in the same room, it wouldn't be for dinner. It would be for truth. I hadn't received an invitation, but I knew exactly where to go. Thanksgiving dinner at Mom's house had always followed the same routine. Same tablecloth, same playlist of holiday classics on low volume, same roster of relatives who only pretended to like each other once a year. The only thing different this time was that I wasn't pretending anymore. By the time I stepped through the doorway, the dining room was glowing under the weight of expectation. Candles flickered, silverware gleamed, laughter bounced off the walls like nothing had ever cracked. Elowyn's laughter stopped first. Then the room followed. Every head turned. I could feel the tension tighten like a string between us all. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said calmly, stepping inside. I was dressed for the occasion, nothing flashy, just firm. In my hand was a thick envelope. Vera stood at the far end of the table, mid-toast, champagne flute half raised. Her jaw clenched so hard I could hear her teeth click. I walked the length of the room slowly, not rushed, not hesitant. At the head of the table, next to her plate, I set the envelope down. "This," I said, tapping it with 2 fingers, "should have been read years ago." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. No one moved. Elowyn lowered her phone. She'd been live streaming again, and stared at me like I was a ghost in heels. Colby shifted in his chair, trying to give a little grin. "Aileen, maybe this isn't the—" "It already is," I cut in. "I'm just presenting the evidence." Vera reached for the envelope but didn't open it. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew, or at least suspected. Footsteps echoed behind me, steady and deliberate. June entered the room, her cane tapping lightly on the tile. "Evening," she said. "Sorry I'm late." June was our housekeeper for nearly 15 years. She knew every inch of that house, every secret that had ever whispered through its walls. But tonight, she was here on my invitation. She cleared her throat and looked directly at Vera. "I was there the day Harold signed those documents. I heard him say, clear as daylight, 'This house goes to Aileen. She's the one who stayed. She deserves to be protected.'" You could have heard a pin drop. "I remember," June continued, "because I thought finally someone was paying attention to what that girl gave up for this family." Elowyn's wine glass tipped, shattering against the edge of her plate. I didn't flinch, neither did June. "Now," she said, turning toward me, "I've got nothing else to say, but I promised Harold I'd speak up if it ever came to this." I nodded to her, grateful. "Thank you, June." She placed a small recorder on the table. "He asked me to record it, just in case." The red light blinked. It was all there. My name, the notary's voice, Harold's declaration, a timestamp, a legal chain they thought they had buried under silence and manipulation. Vera didn't say a word. Her face was porcelain, unreadable, cold. Colby stood halfway, his hands out like a referee at a middle school fight. "Let's not turn dinner into court, okay? We're all here to eat, not to rehash." "You all already turned this into court," I said, still calm. "You just thought I wouldn't show up with the receipts." June turned and left without a goodbye. I followed her toward the door, but not before making one last glance back. Grandpa sat quietly at the edge of the room, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. As I reached the entryway, I heard Elowyn hiss under her breath behind me. "She's coming for all of it." Then Vera, quietly but clearly, "Then let's make her regret it." I stepped outside into the chill of the night air. The porch light flickered once before going still. They wanted war dressed as tradition, and now they were going to get both. The morning after the dinner, my phone buzzed just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Rachel's name flashed across the screen, her message brief and precise. "Filed. There's nothing they can do to stop it." I stared at the screen, letting the weight of her words settle. Nothing they can do. Not Elowyn with her curated branding. Not Vera with her sharp tongue and carefully placed silences. Not Colby, who never outright lied, but never stood up either. It was done. By mid-afternoon, the news had spread. First, it was a cousin from Colorado, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, who called, "Hey, Aileen, I heard about the house. So, it's actually yours?" I kept my response brief. It always was. He mumbled something about needing to check on his dog and hung up quickly. Then came the group chat screenshots, sent to me by a mutual cousin, the kind who stayed neutral until the tide shifted. The family thread was on fire. Messages from Vera stood out in sharp contrast. Clinical, clipped, her tone icy even in text. "She's manipulating Harold. This is what happens when you let old men make emotional decisions. She always wanted the attention." It was like reading a transcript from a courtroom where I wasn't allowed to speak, but was still being sentenced. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, the alert came in. Grandpa had sent an email, not just to me, to the whole family. The subject line, "Clarification regarding property ownership." I opened it with trembling fingers. "To those concerned, this will serve as a formal confirmation that I, Harold P. Wesson, transferred ownership of the property located at 437 Elm Ridge Drive to my granddaughter, Aileen Wesson, 3 years ago. The documents are legally binding, notarized, and reflect my full intent. She is the rightful co-owner of that home." This was not a decision made in haste, but in recognition of the time, care, and sacrifice she made when others would not. I regret that this has caused such discord, but the truth has waited long enough. Respectfully, Harold. The room felt still after I read it. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from finality. That house is hers now, and it always should have been. Those were his words. Public, permanent. There was no backpedaling from that. And yet, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, loaded. Later that night, Vera responded to one of the threads, not to me, not directly, but someone had asked her if she planned to apologize. Her reply? Apologize? For what? Being a mother who protected what was rightfully her children's? I read it twice, then once more. It wasn't anger that stirred in me. It was something colder. I typed a reply and sent it before I could second-guess myself. It was never about being right. It was about being just. She didn't answer. Elowen, on the other hand, sent a private message. "I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just asking you not to go too far with all this." Too far. She had hijacked my brand, tried to erase me from legal ownership, deleted my name from invitations, posts, family stories, and now I was the one going too far? I didn't respond. Colby, as expected, stayed silent. Later that week, I walked through the house alone, the one that now legally bore my name. I ran my fingers along the doorframe in the hallway, tracing grooves I'd made as a kid when I'd carved initials into the wood with a fork. Harold joined me in the kitchen, carrying a small cardboard box. He set it on the counter and pulled out an old set of house keys, my initials still engraved on the tag. He handed them to me without a word. We stood there in silence, but this time it didn't sting. It anchored. They wanted to silence me, but it was their silence that sealed my name in stone. The house felt different with my name on the deed, but it didn't feel like mine. Not yet. I walked room by room that morning, alone, letting my fingers graze the walls, the edges of frames still holding photographs I was never part of. In the hallway, the same runner rug still curled at the corner. No one ever fixed it. In the living room, the same candle holder I gifted Vera sat in the exact place I left it 3 Christmases ago, unopened, still with the tag taped beneath. From Aileen. I didn't move anything. In the bedroom, I pulled open the top drawer of the vanity that had once belonged to Grandma. I wasn't looking for anything, just checking. Old bobby pins, dried perfume samples, a sewing kit, but the ring was missing. Grandma's ring. The one she promised would be mine. It was a delicate heirloom, a slim gold band with a tiny emerald, slightly chipped. She used to say, "It's not much, but it's survived everything." Just like you will. I sat on the edge of the bed, the drawer still open, heart tightening with a familiar ache I didn't have words for anymore. Later that day, while scrolling aimlessly on my phone, I saw it. Elowen had posted a photo, her hand resting on a marble countertop, wineglass in hand, the ring catching the light just so. Caption: "Family treasures never lie." I didn't react. I didn't text. I didn't comment. I screenshot the post and saved it in a new folder I titled History. That weekend, there was a family reunion lunch hosted at a distant cousin's place. I wasn't sure why I went. Maybe curiosity, maybe obligation. Maybe I just wanted to see if they would look me in the eye. They did, but only because they had to. Elowen stood near the fire pit, giving a short speech. "I'm just so proud of how we've kept Grandpa's legacy alive. It hasn't been easy, but I've always tried to protect the house, the family history. Even when things got messy." I stood at the edge of the yard, sipping sparkling water, watching the crowd nod along. Polite applause followed. Someone clapped a little too enthusiastically. No one questioned it. No one corrected her. I didn't speak up. Not there. Not yet. The next day, I drafted an email and sent it to a handful of relatives, the ones who'd asked vague questions, the ones who had whispered, "I didn't know." I kept the tone simple. Attached were the deed, the video of Grandpa at the notary, and a document I had quietly put together, a timeline of my years as his primary caretaker. Dates. Proof. Silence. Only one aunt replied, "I wish I had known earlier. I'm sorry." And that was enough, for now. That evening, I sat on the porch as the sun melted behind the hills. The air smelled like dry leaves and ash from somewhere down the street. Grandpa joined me, settling into the chair beside mine without a word. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo. It was me, maybe 12 years old, standing beside him in front of the house. I was holding a rake. He had one hand on my shoulder, the other holding a coffee mug. On the back, in his unmistakable handwriting, "She's always been the one." I looked up at him. "I don't need them to see me anymore," I said. "I just needed to stop hiding from myself." He smiled, slow and proud. "Then you've already won." We didn't say anything after that. We didn't need to. I may never get their applause, but I've reclaimed my voice. The morning sun crept across the hardwood floors of the now empty house. Dust shimmered in the beams of light slanting through the windows, dancing lazily as if time had finally slowed down. I stood in the foyer with a roll of masking tape in one hand and an open box in the other, surrounded by things that once mattered, or maybe just filled space. I began at the edges: books no one read, throw pillows no one used, picture frames where I wasn't even in the shot. Each item I touched told a quiet story, one of neglect, of absence, of the invisible shelf I'd always been placed on. I didn't pack everything. Only what I chose to keep. The rest could stay as relics of a life I was no longer obligated to maintain. I found a faded blanket tucked in the linen closet, still smelling faintly of cedar and lavender. I folded it with care and set it aside, not because it had meaning, but because I remembered wrapping Grandpa in it when his joints flared in winter. That, at least, was real. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Colby. His text was short. "No hard feelings, I hope. Life moves on." I stared at it for a moment, let my thumb hover over the keyboard. I typed out, "Funny how silence gets rewritten as peace," then deleted it. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "Some conversations don't need closure. Their silence was the message." The weight of those unsent words felt lighter once I let them live somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't asking to be heard. Later that day, an envelope arrived. It was from Vera, legal stationery. No personal note, no handwriting. It was a form, her official waiver of any interest in the property. No apology, no explanation. Just her signature at the bottom, dated and witnessed. She gave up the house the same way she gave up being my mother, without a word. I signed my part in silence and drove the form down to the clerk's office myself. The clerk at the window stamped it with the kind of disinterest only bureaucracy could provide. Still, when I walked out into the cold air, something in my chest shifted. Not joy, not sadness, just a quiet kind of final. That evening, I climbed into the attic, once forbidden ground. I dusted off boxes that hadn't been opened in years and cleared space near the small window. Then I brought in the supplies I'd been storing in my apartment: brushes, canvas, a drop cloth, a new lamp. I didn't paint anything grand that night, just one word on the wall, in thick charcoal strokes: mine. It wasn't about the house, it was about the space, mental, emotional, spiritual, a space that no one gave me, a space I took. A week later, I hosted a dinner. Not for family, not for them, for Rachel, who helped me navigate the legal minefield with patience and clarity. For June, who walked into that dining room and spoke truth without flinching. For a few close friends who'd watched me bend but not break. For Grandpa, of course, who sat at the head of the table where Vera used to preside, carving the roast with a smile that reached his eyes. We raised our glasses, not to blood, but to bond. "To chosen family," I said. "To the ones who see you when you're not performing. To the people who don't just tolerate you, but value you." I caught Grandpa watching me as the others clinked glasses. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His smile said enough. As we cleaned up, one of the guests leaned in and said, "I don't know how you did it without losing your mind." I smiled, gently. I did lose it. Then I built something better. After they left, I stood at the threshold of the house, no longer wondering if I belonged, no longer asking to be let in. The silence that used to gnaw at me was now just quiet, peaceful, mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd lost a family. I felt like I'd found my freedom. The envelope came in a cream-colored mailer with a gold-trimmed edge. No note, no signature, just a typed flyer from Vera's church group inviting me to their holiday charity gala. I wasn't listed as daughter. I wasn't even family, just a community supporter. The irony wasn't lost on me. I placed it on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water. The kind of glass you reach for when you know you're not angry, just done. I read it one more time, then scanned it into a PDF, attached it to a new email, and began drafting something I never thought I'd write. "To whom it may concern," I began. "As some of you may be unaware, I am the legal co-owner of the Wesson property, as documented and confirmed by both court filings and Harold Wesson himself. Attached are the notarized documents, a transcript of his public statement, and a video affirming his intent. I am sharing this not out of malice, but transparency." Then, one line just for Vera. "Sometimes the ones who tell you to forgive the fastest are the ones who've never apologized." I hit send. 2 days later, the fallout was everywhere. It wasn't a scandal. It was clarity. I didn't need to raise my voice. I let the truth echo on its own. Elowen came to my door on a Wednesday afternoon, dressed casually, like this was a normal visit. She held her purse close to her body like a shield. "I just need 10 minutes," she said, shifting awkwardly on the porch. I opened the door wide enough to let the cold in, but not her. "Say what you need." She hesitated. "The taxes on the house are steep. The foundation is asking questions. There's a lot of pressure coming down, and I just thought maybe you could—" I held up my hand. "You used to say I was too sensitive. That was—" "I've grown past that," I cut in. "Now I'm just allergic to your version of love." She flinched. But I didn't wait for a reaction. I stepped back, slowly closed the door, and locked it. Later that night, Grandpa handed me a small envelope. "I've been meaning to give you this," he said. Inside was a faded photograph. I was about 6 years old, standing beside him in the front yard of the house, holding a watering can nearly as big as my torso. My face beamed, eyes squinting against the sun. On the back, in Grandpa's familiar cursive, "She's always been the one." I didn't cry. I smiled gently. Finally, I felt chosen. Not as a second thought, not as a political move, chosen because I always had been. By spring, I made the decision. I sold the house, not to erase the past, but to give it a proper ending. With the proceeds, I created a scholarship in Grandpa's name for young caregivers, the overlooked ones, the ones who stepped up when no one else did. At the announcement ceremony, I stood before a modest crowd of students, sponsors, and local press. "I was once told family is everything," I said. "But I've learned that blood might define your roots, but how you grow, that's your legacy." When the ceremony ended, someone asked if I missed the house. I paused, then answered honestly. I miss the version of myself who thought it would ever love me back. That night, I returned home to my smaller place, not grand, not historical, but it was filled with plants I chose, art I created, people I invited. I curled up on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, and opened a blank document. For once, not to defend myself, but to write a new story. I was no longer asking for a seat at the table. I was building my own.